Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Data Unchained. I'm your host, Molly Presley. So before I introduce today's guest, let me tell you who are new to the show a little bit about this podcast. So as data, infrastructure, networks have become increasingly decentralized, we're trying to create this fabric to connect our world into information sources and AI engines and machine learning models. And Data Unchained digs into, as we've evolved from the world where all the data, the computers, the humans, the networks were sitting in one building next to a mainframe, into the very dispersed world and even into space that we have today. What are some of the challenges of bringing those data sets together? What are some of the technologies that have evolved to help solve this problem? And then ultimately, what kind of business outcomes, if you embrace looking into some of the new solutions and best practices out there, you might get by making some organizational changes to modernize to this decentralized world. I'd like to introduce today's guest. John Capobianco is the head of AI and DevRel over at Itential. Sounds like a big job. But before we jump into that, John, tell us just a little bit about your background and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. So I won't go too long because I have done this for quite a long time. I've been in IT in various forms and in different roles for about 25 years. I actually went to school for computer programming, though. So I found myself working at an aluminum factory, not doing IT or computers, like physically working on the production line, 12-hour shifts with steel-toe boots and very hard physical work. So then I put myself back through school, and I went through a 3-year computer programmer analyst course. I found my way into IT, though, more than programming in terms of my career path, with, certifications and climbing the ladder from help desk into more system admin, into I was reorged into networks in around 2005. So since 2005 or 2008, rather, I've been doing primarily computer networks at large scales. I worked for a very large Canadian insurance company for about 7 years running the network. And then I moved into public sector work with the Canadian Parliament, the House of Commons, as a senior network architect there, where I worked for about 9 years. I think notably in around 2015, 2016, when network automation sort of manifested itself, we were one of the early adopters, and I became one of the public figure around speaking about the intersection between networking and automation at the time. And if we flash forward 10 years, I sit at the intersection of network automation and artificial intelligence. So that's sort of, where I'm at in a nutshell and how I ended up with Itential.
Excellent. Before we talk about Itential a little bit more, for those of the listeners who are actually watching on video, maybe on YouTube or LinkedIn or somewhere, what is your background? You have something called VibeOps Lounge.
Well, so we've heard of traditional ops into DevOps with Agile and the DevOps lifecycle, into net DevOps in my sector, networking DevOps, and AI ops, which was kind of machine learning and predictive trends with network data and things like that. And I like to say, because of vibe coding, the next era is vibe operating or vibe ops, right? So I actually host a Slack channel with over 1,000 people in it now, where I sort of encourage people to come out of their AI closet in a nice safe space where we can share our ideas, share new models, how to do it for free. How are you doing it? How am I doing it? Sharing Git repositories. It's become a really thriving community. And it's a very friendly, non-toxic, all-inclusive space, beginners to experts. And it's become a lot of fun. And so that's where the VibeOps idea comes from. And I sort of cheekily say we can all become vibrators.
I love it. So that's very memorable. Finding this Slack channel, if folks are interested in joining up, how do they do that?
Yeah, reach out to me on my LinkedIn. Actually, after the show,
Okay.
we take in members from all over the place. I'll make sure that we can maybe even post a link in the show notes or something.
Very cool. So you guys cover how to get corporations to embrace your vibe coding and all kinds of things like that in that channel.
Yes, that's part of it, is the struggle, and some people share how their organizations are tackling this and how far along the journey they are. Some people are not allowed to use it at all, and they're seeking, maybe on-prem, private, open source solutions. And it's a very timely discussion about the data and data sovereignty and distributed data, is that The model is very important on where it lives and how people are consuming it, right?
Absolutely. So let's jump into Itential just a little bit. For folks who aren't familiar with the company, tell us a little bit about it.
So Itential's been really the leader in network automation as a platform for about 10 years now. And our new focus, not our new focus, but our focus has adopted and adjusted to meet the demand of agentic operations. And why our platform is unique is because we can provide assets that are deterministic, well-defined workflows that maybe don't even need to require a model, but tap into the reasoning capability and the tool calling capability of the models and marry the two together in the form of Flow AI agents. So customers can start with read-only agents all the way until they start to, we find that read-only activities is where most are starting. But there's huge value in read-only in the networking space. 65% of what a network engineer does is typically read-only. Ticket enrichment, triaging, troubleshooting, root cause analysis, deployments, port turnup. We're finding a huge number of actual use cases for these agents where our platform can host. And it's been a really exciting time. I joined in January because of the promise of their Flow AI platform that they introduced at an AutoCon, which is a network automation convention. And I'm really excited to be here, and we really are actually doing it in production. I see a lot of the last thing that the naysayers are grasping onto is that, well, it's only in a lab. None of this is in production. I would beg to differ. We have agents doing human in the loop, most of it, but there is some human on the loop, human completely out of the loop, agentic operations in flight right now.
And kind of tying back to the data portion of the conversation, since we're on Data Unchained, you and I were chatting a little bit when we first met about how networks generate massive amounts of data, but that remains really difficult to use, difficult to access. Is that kind of an area that Itential is digging into, or is it more of an industry-wide problem?
I think both. I think it has been, and really it exploded with the things, the more capabilities the network started to carry when we get into voice and we get into over power over Ethernet and we get over wireless and all of the hyper-connected things, and then maybe Internet of Things. You said it, there is massive amounts of data. Telemetry is trying to solve this problem, right? So you can build agents that can stream in that telemetry and help you make sense of it in human language, right? So I think that some of the barriers in the networking industry in particular around accessing the data are going to collapse. I think that if we start to shift between humans interfacing with originally directly with the devices and then more and more towards controllers, and the controllers control those devices, both have rich sets of data, right? We want to stream telemetry out. We have legacy protocols like classic syslog and SNMP, things like that. RESTconf, NetConf, XML, JSON payloads, parsing data into JSON with programmatic approaches. So you're right, there's no shortage of data in the network, but often it's overlooked. We need expensive platforms or receivers to collect all of this data. If we think about maybe NetFlow is an incredible capability that not a lot of enterprises maybe adopt, because maybe it's not even because the platforms are expensive. It's that the platforms don't exist. There's not a lot of really good enterprise grade things for like NetFlow and telemetry and all of this. It's a lot of DIY. It's a lot of network automation enthusiasts building their own systems. But if we think about it, it may be under the lens of artificial intelligence now, and we could have that machine learning capability or send these terabytes of data that some of these ISPs generate daily. I previously worked with Selector AI, and some of their customers were sending a terabyte of data, 24-hour windows, that machine learning was crunching and analyzing and trying to, and it's classic techniques that the AI is doing here. We're going to throw away everything good, right? We don't care about the positive signals. It's the negative signals and the faults and the errors and the discards and things like that. So we throw away a lot of that data already because it's good, healthy data, unless we're trying to find healthy trends. We cluster as much of those negative data points together as we can. And then we try to find the root cause analysis using maybe temporal data or flags or metadata, right? There's a lot of enrichment that we can do here so that the human operator can literally ask the AI, ask the agent to go find the problem or give me analysis on the problem that we're troubleshooting and come to a pretty reasonable conclusion as to what the root cause is. So that data, that big data, doesn't just sit frozen in some lake or some warehouse or something somewhere. We can actually make a very good root cause analysis for one. And Molly, you know what excites me the most, especially in the networking world, is the predictive possibilities. I'm going to say possibilities because yes, there's some capabilities with prediction right now. But when they get really good at predicting based on these trends, or if we feed them enough data over however many months they need them, or if we can build agents that can take in multimodal data, maybe the Visio diagram of the topology, right? Maybe the intent, maybe the actual MCP skills to connect to maybe your source of truth or your IPAM for your IP addresses, right? We put all this together and say, if this link fails, or if I add this change, or if I remove this config, what's the impact on the holistic network, right? Because networks are unique, Molly. Yes, a server can go down and maybe bring down the website because it's the only server with that website code, and that's the server that runs the website. Typically that's a VM and there's HA and it'll fail over and everything restores. But in the networking world, everything is so hyper-connected and so complex, particularly at a larger scale, that some of those changes, they're hard to replicate in a lab, right? How to get all that physical gear and rebuild it in a lab to reproduce the exact same scenario, right? Like I think the data is going to be a key to unlocking predictive questions to avoid outages, to avoid changes, to avoid human error, right? And maybe bring the quality and the service levels up to the nines that we want them.
It's interesting. I speak to guests across all different types of industries, and that idea of using AI to help predict and prevent, I think, is so top of mind to everyone, whether we're talking human health, we've had folks on from government who are developing weapons for national protection to network outages, whatever it is. I think that's one of the big hopes for AI is we can find a world where there's less problems, we can get ahead of them faster. And it sounds like that's really top of mind in your space as well.
Well, and if I could give some real world examples, because I've seen them and I can speak about them. The larger and faster these networks get, the more complicated the actual interface between the fiber optic cables and the machine, the router or the switch are. Like they're complex optic cards. They tend to heat up and they tend to overheat and burn out. And that's an expensive card, and you might have dozens of these cards in a giant box in a data center somewhere, right? Well, with the predictive approach, you can look at the heat over the curve, and it actually will say you're in the yellow now, right? And you've got X amount of time before you reach red. So as opposed to a reactive approach, and I'm not saying there isn't monitoring systems out there that can already do this, but what I'm saying is that the AI can actually look at the metrics of these temperatures over time and give you a rough idea on when that optic needs to be replaced or repaired, or we need more cooling or whatever the situation is, right? And then you can schedule it. Then you can plan around it. Then you can drain traffic off of that link, address the optic issue, and bring traffic back, right? Like without disruption or downtime or outages, right? And that could be a 400 gig link, or more in the near future, right? When you're talking about data, it's remarkable how much data can be moved around the network now, right? Like I think most of us started with 10 megabit per second, right? And now we're talking about 400 gigabit per second, soon to be 8, or already 8, soon to be 1.2 terabytes per second over fiber, right? Or over a wire.
So moving that terabyte of generated data around is not such a big deal anymore, right?
Yeah, well, it's remarkable how the hardware enables the software, and how these repetitions over time, over the past 30 or 40 years, that we get GPUs and look at the capability that it's offered us. And now we get, these super high speed links. Well, it turns out we're going to need those super high speed links to move all this, generated context around, right? And for models to move weights around and things of that nature, right? When we need to train these models at scale, the network is a key component of that, right? And for maybe people who don't know, there might be, I'm just going to pick a number. Let's say 1,000 GPUs in a cluster. Those are all networked together. And by the nature of things, it's sort of an any to any. And if you drop one packet, everything pauses and has to converge and send that again to everybody, right? So the network is becoming, now imagine it takes 3 months to train a model without any drops. How much time are you adding every time you drop and have to redo every, retransmission, right? It's a scaling problem, right? So
absolutely.
The network is
everyone's
absolutely
focused on GPU efficiency, using those GPUs as frequently and as efficiently as possible, and identifying all these little places where you're adding inefficiencies adds up to, 1,000 GPU cluster, probably millions of dollars, right?
Right. And I was speaking to some people who are much more in the know than I am, but they work for a neo cloud, and they were explaining that what's even more interesting is that the traffic patterns are all quite different between training a model, doing inference on a model, right? Or fine tuning a model. Like the traffic patterns are all completely different, and the network needs to be able to handle any use case, right? And open to all traffic patterns. So there are different problems, even depending on if it's just for inference or are you training, the network could be configured quite differently.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you one more question about good and bad data. And when you're saying good, you're saying environment's healthy, good things are happening, bad, there's a problem running, I think. Are you seeing that with this trend towards, using agents to interface with some of this, trying to predict and prevent, are people keeping more of that data so that they can feed it into these models? Even the good stuff that, is kind of business as usual?
I believe they are. And the retention policies may need to be adjusted around enterprises if they really want to use that data to train models or to fine tune models. There's a lot of rich information in there. And there's sort of like a retrieval augmented fine tuning approach, right? Like you could easily take and I've actually done this. I have some video content about it. Taking a Llama 3 model, for example, or a Gemma 4 model, or pick your open source model, and mutate it to understand your network's trends and capabilities with that data. Especially the more data that you have, you can build up a better training set to fine tune the model, right? And it's an incredible time with all of this open source discussion about open weight models, all the signatures and NVIDIA coming out. We see more and more open weight models, which are more and more capable by the day, it seems. And in my industry, so even Cisco is releasing open source models now for security and for, that they've trained on their documentation and on their vulnerabilities and what they've seen. So some of these models are actually starting to manifest itself, industry specific small language models that are hyper tuned to, vulnerabilities in the security case.
When we look at the interaction of all this, not just the data, the people, the controllers, how do you see agents becoming, are they effectively the interface now?
I like to think so, or maybe not now, soon. Or that's a great caveat. Yeah. So yes, I think that there's a couple of things that, like, I think software-defined networking, there was a big promise around it where humans would interact with a controller and the controller interfaces with the fleet of devices. For anyone who has wireless, it's usually how wireless is done. You have a wireless controller and all of the access points answer to that controller. And you don't configure the access point, you speak to the controller. Well, I think we're going to go a step further away and speak to an agent, and that agent drives the controller, or in some cases, the devices directly. And that will be our interface, and it will be natural language that we interface with and receive responses in. No more cryptic syslog messages or traps or JSON data or payloads that you have to know the syntax and know the language to read. It's going to be human language back and forth. And what I love about it is any language, it won't necessarily just be English, So that really democratizes it even more, that you can use your true natural language and speak to these and hear them back in natural language. And I'm not saying they don't make mistakes. I know a lot of people get hung up on the determinism in networking because it has to be idempotent, right? It has to be repeatable, or if you run that command 1,000 times, it should have the same outcome. And we sort of get into this world of it's not going to have the same outcome, or it may not have the same outcome, or be a little slightly different in certain ways. But again, if I think that we can put the right guardrails and use the right tools and skills to make it quite as deterministic as a human. Humans make mistakes. Humans lose their train of thought. Humans type in the wrong thing. I think perfect maybe is is setting the bar a little too high for this. I think very, 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 very good is not objectionable, and especially with read-only capabilities. And if that's as far as we get, if we never get enough trust or capability to turn into read or write mode, not just read, but actually writing changes, yes, that needs a lot more trust and guidance and governance. And I would never let it just do that. It's going to have a ticket in a maybe ServiceNow or something. It's going to have approvals. It's going to have to check with a human. I think people jump to write to, this agent's going to configure everything. Well, maybe not. It will be a part of the process now. Like you said, it will be the interface and how we drive our work. And I don't think that's limited to networking, Molly.
No, it's very similar, I think, across whether you're talking about GPUs or the workloads or, whoever's creating the data, whatever the data generators are. I think it's true across the board.
And I think for a while it will still be an augmentation. I don't know that I believe that AI has displaced that many jobs. I know a lot of companies claim that it's AI related, but there's a lot of other things going on when there's the mass layoffs, at least right now. I think it's going to augment us. I think it's going to be, like Cisco's approach was, and Microsoft's approach, and a few other technology giants' approach is to give their employees an assistant, an AI agent, right? Like OpenClaw was rolled out at Microsoft, or will be. Cisco rolled out an assistant, an agent to every employee. So when you get hired in the workforce now, you're going to have your handbook and sign up for dental and all that stuff. And you're also going to be introduced to your own agent.
And that's the thing. Productivity, AI is able to move things quickly, and each human needs to be more productive with every minute we're spending too. And this is just all, part of our evolution for sure.
Well, I'd like to ask you the one barrier for entry, or at least a perceived barrier, and this is what I'm asking you, is that your data has to be completely like sorted out and good and clean and in order before you leap and adopt AI. Do you believe that I'm just curious, do you see more of that? Is that what you're hearing, that we can't adopt AI until we get our data strategy sorted out?
It's interesting. I was out at a conference called Raise out in Paris a couple of weeks ago, and it's, a big AI leadership across the globe, thought leadership event. And data strategies came up in almost every talk on the keynote stage. And that was the model builders, the neo clouds, the infrastructure people, kind of across the board. And it was less about, I can't start until my data's AI ready, it was kind of the term in air quotes that everyone's using, but more about if I want to scale it across my enterprise, I need to do both. So I can get a pilot or a work group, my AI strategy sorted out, my governance policies, everything built. And then if I want to make AI kind of the operating system of my environment or of my enterprise across everything, across finance, R&D, marketing, everything, probably that's where the data has to be really cleaned and prepped. But I think it's different than what they're talking about in like the data science ETL space. It's not like extract it, cleanse it, make it perfect, put it back in. It's more of a real-time process. And it's like what you're talking about, like with MCP, and then using software to make sure certain rules are adhered to. So get your governance policies in place, have software that can implement those with your data, and then let it kind of govern itself, I think is where some of the more advanced implementations of AI are now, and where others will get to in the future. But it's different than the data science cleansing process.
I think that's a reasonable take. I've tried to encourage people that you can use one to solve the other. Like maybe getting your data clean is the first thing you use AI to do. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I know in our world, there's a lot of talk about source of record and source of truth, and how do we build that? How do we store that? Are we going to write an application to do that? So that's a big topic in networking in general. And I understand why, because a lot of industries are audited, a lot of industries are regulated, and they need to show their circuits, their IP addresses, the all of that stuff needs to be readily available. And I think AI can help get there. Right. So one of the agents that I built was actually an agent to go scrape the network for information like that, interfaces and IP addresses and things you would want to store somewhere, and go build that source of truth for the user, agentically. Right. And it was amazing how it's not just about fast, right? I know I get caught up in speed, but it took me a minute to fill out the prompts. It took me a minute to pick the tools. It took 2 minutes to run the agent. And now suddenly I've got a source of record in the cloud that, if I had to do that by hand, it would have taken me not a half a day, but it would have taken me quite a bit of time to do that by hand, bespoke in the cloud, clicking menus and buttons. Or I could spend that time writing a Python script to do it, right? Like, there's no way around it. You're going to have to invest the time. But now that's all collapsed. Like I just described you're going to get the information from the network about this. And then you're going to use these APIs and these MCP tools to populate it in this tool. Enter, pick the tool, hit send, and suddenly it's a solved problem. I can move on with my day, right?
Yeah. And, one of the things I really like about AI in this space is how it can look at different types of data sets and correlate some things that each individual file or object or whatever it is on its own looks okay. But you put this one, and this one together. And I'm thinking about your experience in the Canadian government. I've seen this with a lot of governments. What they're really liking about data prep with using AI is they can look at more complex questions of, well, this file's fine on its own and this object's fine on its own, but you put them together and that says something we don't want to release or something like that. And I think this could make sense across, we have data storage, you have networking information, there's agent information, being able to correlate that all together, I think will actually ultimately de-risk the use of data.
I think so, and I hope so. The other thing is that you can give AI some very strict instructions, and it itself has enough guardrails in it. I found that, I'm developing something on the side here. This is kind of anecdotal, but it understood that it was going to be reading network configurations at some point. And it sort of threw a flag up to me saying, listen, there's going to be passwords and secrets and hashes and, possibly other information that maybe we shouldn't be transferring over the wire, right? Do you want me to automatically cleanse this stuff? Or if I detect it, reject it outright, that I'm not going to send this along because it's got a password in it, right? I think that's remarkable. I think that the AI actually, it's almost treating me like a junior or like a baby or like someone who needs this sort of instruction, right? Like, okay, John, don't forget there's going to be passwords. So how do you want me to handle it? But I love that. Like it actually is sort of reinforcing good design and good patterns. And yes, and the alternative is that it just doesn't deal with that and lets me just march along and send that stuff in the clear, right? Or it handles it and doesn't tell me that it's handling it. And then I haven't learned anything about the process, right? So I'm learning from it still every time I use it. It's remarkable. And even, I got to be honest with you, Molly, right now, on this other screen off the camera, I've got 2 agents running in loops right now. I'm you check me glancing once in a while because I've got 2 build agents in like a 4-hour loop running this code and building various things, right? So the other thing, actually, speaking of data, we talk about abstraction layers, right? And, I'm sort of at the point where I'm not really even reading a lot of the code that's being generated anymore. I'm sort of taking it and running with it. And I feel like that's an abstraction layer above, maybe I used to install a package with Python to use or install a Node.js package or something. I never went and read those packages Git repository and looked at their code. I sort of just installed them and used them to build other things. Well, now I'm not even generating the code itself. I'm just, okay, right, the app works or this doesn't work, and I sort of give feedback, and I'm looking at logs, and I don't know that we even, I don't know how long before it's just ops or coding. We've got the VibeOps here, but I hear less and less people talking about vibe coding because I think it's just coding now. Isn't that just the way we do it? Isn't that just the way it's done now, is to use AI to help you?
Absolutely. I think so. I mean, I think every engineer has got to have their AI assistant, as you call it. You see the biggest companies, the biggest tech companies, giving them almost unlimited tokens or expecting to spend more on tokens than their annual pay. So I believe that's certainly the direction folks are going.
Well, to tie it back to Itential's purpose, that's exactly what we're trying to do, but for the infrastructure space. And we're strong believers that infrastructure does not have to be behind or wait 10 years like they did for network automation. We believe that networks and infrastructure, broadly speaking, can be first-class citizens, and it's funny, I had a discussion, I'll leave them anonymous, but it was a very large bank from a nation state, and they were sort of puzzled as to how to get started, and they had a lot of counterpoints as to why they can't do it. And so then I stopped, and I don't know why. I just thought to ask them. I said, well, at your bank, in the software department, are they using these tools? Like, are they using AI in that, or is it just outright no one? Well, they're using, of course they're using it, right? Right. So, well, why not you? Why can only that department take advantage of these tools? Like, I think that we need to change our mindset here. Now, yes, infrastructure is quite a bit different, because it's not software, it's actual hardware. And, life and safety actually rides on some of that network. But is it not the point? Is that not why we should be applying AI to it, to make that even better and more robust? Is it not defeatist to say, well, it's so fragile because it's the network, that we just can't innovate. We just can't try this stuff, right? I don't know. It seems defeatist to me.
It's interesting. Because I'm not from the networking world, I would not have known that was a reaction that people have. So I'm learning that that's a concern.
Well, so stability is the number one concern of networks, right? Not necessarily innovation, right?
Historically said, I need my 6, 8, 10, 9s, whatever, of availability across everything, right? That's how you build up your SAP or whatever. And there's the concerns of breaking that at any layer, that, oh my God, my enterprise has to be up all the time. And will this break it? I don't know, because we proved this for the last 20 years. I mean, there's just fear, right?
I know. So I hope it doesn't hold us back. I hope at least maybe people can be, I know a lot of places are like us, our customers in particular, a lot of them, yes, are very forward thinking and very advanced and but they are doing that. Their staff has token budgets. They're building agents. The agents are useful and valuable and really helping them. So I just and I understand it. It's not like I don't understand why network and infrastructure is behind or is not behind. Maybe that's not the right word. More prudent, more stable, different concerns. They have much different concerns than fast and agile and getting the latest out there, right? There's some enterprises that have closets with networks that haven't been upgraded in 8 or 9 years, right?
Yeah, I believe it.
It just works. Don't touch it. Just it works, right?
Yeah. So before, jumping off that topic and talking a little bit about standards. So we talked about the interface is becoming more standardized, but standards across the board in your space and just kind of for AI overall, it seems like it comes up at conferences a lot, no matter which part of the entire stack you're in. What's your perspective on the importance of standards in moving this all forward?
Well, I think that the reason why we're experiencing this sort of Cambrian explosion of innovation right now is partly because of model context protocol. And then an actual protocol that came out that dealt with dealing with context and sending it to a model. For listeners out there, maybe MCP is not your thing, but it was released by Anthropic. They've since donated it to the AI Agentic Foundation, and it's a protocol. Now it wasn't released by the IETF, right? But Since then, and since everyone had a common way, now has a common way to interface with tools in particular, or present tools to the language model, that standard has led to massive human innovation and leaps ahead, right? The A to A protocol as well, agent to agent, I should mention that, is facilitating people making you making your agent Molly and my agent John's agent, and they can communicate with each other over the internet, right? So yes, that is where we need to start. That is what we need more of, are more and more standards and protocols, because I think it also bleeds into things like legislation. It bleeds into, like with MCP, for example, like with email. I really do compare it to SMTP for email or HTTP for web traffic. It's client server. It shares a lot of the same properties and principles. But what's neat is that I can plug John's MCP for networking into Claude Code, into Copilot and VS Code, into Anti-Gravity. I can write my own agent and plug it into it, right? Like when I send an email, it's not like, because there was a real challenge, Molly. You might remember this when things were, maybe it was going to shape up where if you wanted to send an email with Gmail, you had to use a Google client.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
But that's not the way protocols kind of shaped up, right? It's sort of an open commons standards that everyone can benefit from. I can use Outlook to send email to Gmail to Hotmail to whatever. Right? Like there's no one, it's not like VHS and Betamax kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're
one
past
major
that,
form
right?
factor moving on, yeah.
Right. So I think that MCP has offered that, and that almost anyone can plug that JSON into whatever client they want. And it's led to huge innovation. And it's JSON RPC too. If any of the data heads care, under the hood, model context protocol is JavaScript object notation, remote procedure calls under the hood. And when, so ChatGPT 01 introduced reasoning, and I'm not sure when tool calling was introduced, but the combination of those two things, the ability for the LLM to reason and the ability for the LLM to call tools, led to the rise of a protocol for those tools in model context protocol. So it's quite simple to snap together an agent and say, I don't know, the weather network MCP, if they have one, and I plug it into my agent, and now my agent can check the weather for me just by asking it, right?
That all seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? That chat couldn't do that. It wasn't a lifetime ago, but boy, it seems like it.
It really does. And that's how fast things have moved. And I think it's largely because of, not just because of MCP. I don't want to overblow it, but that was for me, a key component. And the other thing around data, the previous generation was retrieval augmented generation, which I don't think a lot of people talk about, because maybe it's become commonplace, but that is a real key to good AI agents and strategies as well, is giving it external knowledge by uploading PDFs, uploading documents.
As continually as possible, right? You want, ideally, as fast and continually as you're able.
Yeah, and I know some people thought because of the size of the context windows, they're so large now, maybe we don't need RAG. But I still like the approach. I really like, taking a document, turning it into vectors, putting it in a store, and then letting the model reference that vector store against the prompt. It's a truly, it's an unsung hero. I don't think enough people talk about RAG anymore. But, it's attention spans and things that we've moved on to MCP, and now we've moved on to agents, and we'll see where it all goes.
It's interesting. My company has a RAG solution. I bring this up not to sell the RAG solution, but more, we actually are finding it's just now that enterprise customers are able to articulate what their RAG need is and have a project for it. So while the industry from a marketing and what's maybe on CNBC has kind of moved on, I feel like a lot of the enterprises are just getting going with it too, So sometimes I think we're moving faster than the customers are on actually getting this stuff, deployed and budgeted and, plan for it.
Well, to your point, I've run a RAG to MCP kind of journey workshop, and I've run it twice now over a year, and it's sold out both times, and people are like, a lot of people haven't heard of RAG, or at least they haven't implemented it and tried it with their own hands. And it's become so popular, I think I'm going to run it again this year. I had planned on retiring it because I thought, are people really still interested in RAG? But people, like you, to your point,
Yeah.
I think they are. And I think some of us need to remind ourselves that there's a 1% of the 1% that some of us are in. Like someone sent me an article that only 2% of Americans in the United States of America have a paid AI subscription.
Interesting.
2%.
That's much lower than I think any of us would expect.
I would have guessed at least 26, 30%. I don't know. Like I would assume everyone had one, but it's very, very low still. So, that's, I think, why I enjoy these conversations, Molly, and I appreciate you inviting me, is to really to have the conversations about AI and data and strategies and how it's being done in the real world, and, to give people some optimism and some hope around this stuff.
There's a lot of good. It's not just fear.
There is a lot of good. There is a lot of good around the data point. I don't want to be go on too much longer, but someone who told me at the hospital in Gatineau, where I live, that due to AI results in a Montreal study, 70% less false positives for colonoscopy cancer results.
Amazing.
The seven out of 10. The nurse was explaining this to me. 7 out of 10, right? Less people they have to tell every week or whatever that they are in fact not, and they don't have it, right? Mm-hmm. So I like to find that silver lining. People listening out there about data points, do a Google News search for AI cancer research, like every couple weeks, just to see what humans are doing. Because the helpers out there, the good people, there are people really trying to tackle significant problems with this technology.
Absolutely. And an analog to that, not just the diagnosis, but the treatment. I've had guests on this show and have really been following that too. The development of the treatments, the medications, that if you did get the positive, the likelihood of a good outcome is much, much better too, which is really exciting. That matters to all of us and our families, right?
Well, and I think, what else did we make these computers for in the first place other than, to improve the human experience around the world, right?
Absolutely. So as we tie up, you are an expert in networking, network data, a ton about AI. What would you leave organizations with? As they're trying to make sure that they're prepared for the next 6-12 months, maybe next few years, what can they do to be prepared to really have an optimal AI implementation?
Well, I would start with, if you don't already have one, like an AI strategy or an AI governance board is what I would start with, an AI governance board. There's also, in my industry, for example, there is things like an AI readiness assessment from Cisco you can take. I would try to intersect with your data governance people. If you have data classification people, have some of those people as part of this discussion. Bring people from all different parts of your enterprise. Like Molly mentioned, your HR, your finance, your marketing, your infrastructure and IT departments, your security, your CISO. Try to make up a good mix of an AI governance board and try to tackle it. Are you in an industry that can't use a cloud provider? Is on-prem an option for you? Do you have the capability in your data center to host the hardware needed to provide local models? Are you already in agreement with a cloud provider for other services that can guarantee you data sovereignty for your AI? That they're not going to learn from your data, for example, right? So tackle these things at the high level, and at the low level, empower your people. If there's any way at all to start letting them use Copilot, or start letting them maybe use local models on their Mac, and maybe approve the Gemma 4 model or something. I think we need to take proactive action, right? And we don't, you don't want to be, I think this is much different than the .com, where everyone had to have a website suddenly overnight, and then the better websites, and then we had a bubble and all the rest of it. This is like a horse and buggy or a printing press, or I think this is an inflection point as big as the computer was and as big as the internet was, and maybe will eclipse some of those technologies over time. So, thank you, Molly, for having me on. And, I know I didn't go on too much about data, but I do appreciate being on the data show. I think
this is fantastic. It all comes together. It's all dependent on each other and intertwined with each other. So I think you've been a great guest. I know you mentioned that you have done a lot of work, educational, in addition to just VibeOps Lounge. Where can listeners follow your work? And we'll drop a link to that in the show notes as well.
Sure. I think my YouTube's probably the best place to catch up on actual recordings. I sort of it's not super polished. It's very punk rock garage. I'll record what I'm building or try to cover some topic. My LinkedIn, I'm available to connect and reach out. And if you have any questions at this, got you thinking about anything like this or agents, reach out to me there. And I am also on Twitter X as well. But those are probably the three primary channels.
Okay. Sounds great. Thanks so much for joining the show. And I hope our paths cross, maybe some industry event or something like that. We'll bump into each other.
Yeah, if you've got an extra ticket to Paris next time, I'd be happy to tag along.
The ticket's not just Paris, but the private event at Versailles. That was definitely one of those tickets you wanted to have because they shut it down. They had period dress with music and champagne that was, high end and lovely. That was the one you want to get the ticket to for sure.
Well, if you hear, amongst the tuxedos and the champagne, if you hear someone saying, we'd love to have a networking keynote maybe next time.
I'll keep my ear out for that. Absolutely.
I'll be the one. All right.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks,
Well, thank
John.
you so
nice
much.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Data Unchained, powered by Hammerspace. To learn more, visit hammerspace.com. If you have a guest you would like to hear on the show, email me at molly@hammerspace.com.